I like you, by the way, for whatever that matters. Since I may vote for you, that ought to matter to you.
Now, Cary, I realize that Sonia Sotomayor is probably your kind of judge. She fits your political persuasion. But wouldn't you like some cantankerous, feisty, adversarial, back and forth discussions of various judicial opinions instead of this love fest that's taking place?
Well, then I suppose we'd have to invent a government in the United States that would be capable of doing that. I mean, let's face it, we've got basically a gated community in Washington, D.C. It's a chum fest, tossing around billions of your dollars for purposes of fill in the blank. Now, let's take a look at Sotomayor, though. Realistically, I mean, this woman excluded, and this has been excluded from the confirmation hearings, but she did something that was really rather feisty. Let's take that prisoner, a guy named Jeffrey Descovich, 16 years in the slammer, and wasn't released until DNA evidence finally brought him out. In 1997, 9 years before his eventual release, he appealed that conviction to Sonia Sotomayor. And what did she do? She dismissed his appeal without even blinking an eye because his paperwork came in 4 days too late. So that was the end of him. This is not atypical for her. She's a hard-ass judge when it gets down to it. The way she talks as a Latina and the rest of it, being sensitive and whatever, makes sense. Absolutely. Much as a Quaker, might be thinking that war is not the best choice. When it gets down to the Constitution, however, my job is to think of Tommy Jefferson and Benny Franklin, right?
Tommy Jefferson and Benny Franklin? Yeah,
first name basis.
Oh, actually. I see. You're really tight with them. Anyway, I thought that the only highlights of both days so far have been the eclectic type of protesters who have been dragged out of the room. Today, we had an anti-abortion protester who interrupted Judge Sotomayor when she was speaking.
The Didden case presented a narrow issue that the court below and...
Officer, remove that man immediately. We will stand in order. We will stand in order. Officers will remove that man.
Now,
and they did. And they did.
And they did.
Now, Cary, you've been a participant in many demonstrations in your life. How would you rate that particular demonstrator? I mean, forget. I know you disagree with the policy you were screaming about. He's an anti-abortion protester, but he certainly brought some energy into the hearings. He sort of like fired them up.
Well, we do love a little burlesque in our politics. It's kind of like when you're watching the British, when you're watching Parliament and they stand up and pound their fists and sputum dangles off their chins. It's fairly exciting. Unfortunately, if that's going to be the highlight here, what we really want to get down to, I think all of us, is a collapsing country right now, totally bankrupt, to the tune it's really added up into the $60 to $70 trillion, $167,000 debt per person in the United States. I mean, these almost impossible things to deal with. We've got the NSA still surveilling us. We've got all this stuff going on. What does she think about that? And the very people who created these laws, who have abnegated and abrogated your and my civil rights, are not asking her those questions. So, let's all get in there and yell and throw a sneaker and cut a fart, right?